Hello and welcome to my channel, The Coherence Path. My name is Stefan Senna and I basically just share thoughts and ideas that I have. And if you can use them, that's great. If you can't, well, that's fine too. If you want to follow and subscribe, that's totally up to you. I'm doing this as a community project that might help others. Some years ago, I did another community project. I created a bunch of wings that were all different, and I put them around the neighborhood, covering different blocks, so the people could, if they were riding their bike or walking by, they could take a photo in front of the wings and have fun with that. So this is sort of like that, except I'm sharing information based on my own life experiences, research, or what I've heard from others that I feel at peace with. The topic of today that I want to talk about is about blocks. We might have blocks in our lives, such as emotional or mental blocks, and I've experienced quite a few of those myself. I thought it was appropriate that there's two things going on in this video, and I will try to speak clearly enough and loudly enough so that you can hear me. One is this nice pond in the back of my friend's yard, and the other thing is the wind. Now, wind moves through trees and it clears out in the fall any leaves that are loose and that are going to break free from its branches. And water, when it's moving, it moves debris downstream and carries nutrients out to the ocean. So these are two things in nature that we know that create the ability to remove blocks: the wind and the water, and that's perfectly natural, and we see it all the time. In our own lives, we know that when we cry, or maybe when we shout or get upset and just allow ourselves to really express emotion, that can move energy, as long as it's done in a positive way and that doesn't harm anyone else. We know that that's destructive and it doesn't help anybody. And so in our lives, we might have just moments or periods of time where we have blocks within ourselves. Now, speaking specifically to people who are of my generation or older, who perhaps are retired, it's a perfect time to think about, if you have free time on your hands because you're retired, time to think about things that maybe are mesmeric inertia within your life. That's a Koine term that I put in my book, and it's basically about the mesmerizing way or hypnotic way that habits can create inertia or movement in sort of a loop pattern within our lives. Let's say you've only ever eaten the same scone and had the same cup of coffee at the same coffee shop in your town for the last 5 or 10 years. Your habit of going there is an example of mesmeric inertia. Or if you've only ever discussed certain things in a certain way with somebody, but never really opened up a conversation for maybe a broader acceptance of their point of view, that's another example of mesmeric inertia. So we could look at these habits that we have, these ways of being, as blocks. Now, they could be a good block. You could do something that always perpetually keeps you within a certain vein of living that you enjoy. Let's say if you're an author, you might have a habit of getting up every morning, getting your coffee, sitting down and writing for 2 hours undisturbed. Now, that could be a good example of mesmeric inertia, where you've trained yourself through habit to do something that you really enjoy. Or that could be painting a painting, or playing a guitar, or doing something that has to do with your work, or who knows what it is. You know, you can look into your life and see that. Now, where it becomes a problem is when we have things in our lives, blocks or mesmeric inertia that locks us into a pattern of doing something that isn't a good idea, or that in the long run we really would rather invest our time doing something else. Well, then we can ask ourselves, we can look at nature and we can ask, how is it that the wind just comes in and moves things along? How is it that water will, you know, undermine and uplift things and move those along? And water, how it gets underneath things and around things, is good as a good metaphor for how we can look at something that perhaps we'd like to change in our life. And that's just by getting around it or underneath it, asking questions like, how is it that this all started? Where did this begin? How is it that I can look at this differently? It could be, a number of things. Maybe, again, speaking to those who are retired, maybe you've always wanted to go on a trip or you've always wanted to spend time with family members or friends that live in another state or another country. Well, there's nothing really stopping you from creating a plan to do that. You don't always have to have the answers. And that's what coherence is, and that's what this channel is about. It's about becoming coherent with your life and inviting opportunity to help you along. It's my point of view that we are the universe. Everything around us is just a reflection and cooperation with our own consciousness. And the only thing that really stands in the way is when we're trying to figure it out, if we're trying to control it. Now, mesmeric inertia, or our habits of doing things, can be a very controlling factor. It may be that, I'm not going to really talk to so-and-so unless I write them a letter first, because I want to make sure that they're receptive to me just showing up or calling them on the phone. But we never get around to the email. We never get around to writing them a letter, whatever it is, because we keep stopping ourselves out of fear. So that mesmeric inertia, that belief system, that construct that says, well, we have to do this first in order to move beyond that, is the block. It's the structure that's getting in our way. To become coherent with the situation, we have to maybe shift away from that point of view and say, the only way that can happen is if I start with just this one little step. And maybe the next step will lead to the next one. And our willingness to consider that we would break away from our habit invites a whole other opportunity. We realize just that shift, just that openness to considering something different opens up a whole new world. And we realize that the mesmeric inertia that we had is just habit. That's all it is. There's no big programming that's buried inside of us that's controlling us and making us do what we're doing. We're just making a different choice. And mesmeric inertia is basically the habit of making the same choice over and over and over and over and over. Just like going to that coffee shop. You think, it's my neighborhood coffee shop and I go in there all the time, I see the same people. But maybe some part of you wants to meet different people or see a different coffee shop, or maybe you're tired of the coffee that they serve. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe it's perfectly fine. You'll continue to go there for the rest of your life. But if there's something urging you or sort of speaking to you about, it'd be kind of nice to go to the other coffee shop other people are telling me about. I've tasted or seen some of the goodies that they have. But for some reason, you just keep going to the same one. Just the idea that you would consider going there just once, just trying it out, that's enough to make you realize, if you observe, that the framework doesn't even exist that makes you go to the one you're going to. It's just a decision you're making. There's no internal programming that's making you go there. Just like that can apply to how you utilize your money and finances. It could be the same thing. Well, it's always this way, and this is always a result, and I guess it's not going to change. I've dealt with some of that my whole life. You know, being able to manage a savings plan or paying bills on time. I think most people can relate to that. Some people are really good at it, and they just make the decision every month to do certain things, and it always goes in their favor because they keep making those decisions. And here's an example. Like for years, I didn't put things on automatic payment. I just had my own reasons, whether it was my income varying from month to month, working for myself, or whatever it was. I just decided, I don't know if I just want people taking stuff out of my account when I don't know when it's happening. But once I did that, once I just had everything converted to having automatic payments taken out, I don't even think about it. And I certainly don't ever experience having something late again. And so it was just a simple decision of me becoming coherent with the idea that I could do that small little step, and that then I wouldn't have to think about that again. So we have an opportunity to think about how we want to live our lives. If you're retired and you've always worked your whole life, but maybe not embraced some interest or passion or talent or hobby that you've always thought about, now's the time you can just kind of question, well, what kind of habits are stopping me from even considering doing that? And what could I actually do in small steps to making that happen? So it's kind of like, you got a big pile of dirt, in your yard, or let's say compost. A lot of people get that delivered. They get compost delivered to their yard, and then you have to put it around in small piles and spread it out with a rake. And that happened to me some years ago. There's a tree company that offers free bark chips. And what they do is they just show up and they drop off about probably 10 or 15 yards of bark chips. Well, when you look at it on the internet and you look at the photo, you think, oh, it's a pretty good sized pile. And so you sign up for it. It's free. It's going to be good for nurturing the soil. And then once the truck just randomly shows up and you get off work and the pile is about, chest height, and it's about 30 feet long and about 10 or 12 feet wide, you look at that pile and go, what the heck was I even thinking? Because the pile is so big that there's no possible way you could remove it or shift it around in your yard over the course of one day or two or even three. I think that pile that I had took me, working on it after work and, some days and not others. If they were all total, it probably took me a week just to move all that material around the yard. And that was something I really didn't think about. It was something, though, that was embedded in the formula of the free gift. I just didn't realize what all the parameters were. And sometimes life's that way. We sign up for something and it's not quite what we think. Maybe there's something that you've always wanted to do, and you don't realize once you start all the challenges that might come with it. But, that's part of just opening ourselves up to the coherence of going on a little adventure or some little exploration, whether it's starting an art project, a project on your house, going on a trip, whatever it is. In fact, the friend of mine whose yard this is, they're on a trip right now. And I remember the last trip they went on, they talked about things that they didn't quite expect, that they experienced during that trip. And that's the way life is. Sometimes you get little surprises along the way, things you can't account for, because we can't account for everything. There's just no possible way. Our consciousness through the lens of humanity is pretty restricted. You know, we're interpreting consciousness through our eyes, our ears, our taste, our smell, our feel, our touch, and it's pretty limited because all that stuff is right here now. I could tell you what everything smells like around here, and I could go around and touch, you know, the rocks and the steps and the water and everything. I can tell you everything about how all that stuff feels, and probably within 15 minutes you'll be fully informed of all that. But there's no way for me to tell if I walked out of this backyard and out into the street out front. There's no way I could tell you who you would meet, what the color of the cars were, if there was a dog or cat walking down the street, or a squirrel, a bird flying overhead. There's just no way I could do that unless I was psychic. But there would be something that there's no way I could account for. You know, when Monroe Institute, they've spent decades studying out-of-body experiences and worked with even the U.S. government doing remote viewing. And there were so many variables that they couldn't account for that's a summation of some of the conclusions they came to. Because yes, we can do those things, and yes, those things are possible, but there's no way you can account for everything. That's like me trying to tell you how many grains of sand was on the beach. By the time you even got close to counting 1/1,000,000th of the grains of sand on the beach, more had washed up on shore and some had gone away. It's just an impossible task. So you and I are never going to know from point A to point B exactly what's going to happen in between. You're just not going to know. And if the block that's stopping us from doing something, if it's because we're afraid of something that we may not experience, well, you just gotta let that go. Because if you're coherent within yourself, in other words, you're honoring yourself and you're saying, you know what, nobody cares, but I do. It's my life. And I'm gonna just go down and I'm gonna buy a pet turtle and I'm gonna befriend it, and I'm gonna have a relationship with this little turtle. I'm going to be kind to it. I'm going to be nice to it. I'm going to make it a nice environment in my house. It's something I've always wanted to do, was to have a pet turtle. Then just go do it. You know, you're going to discover things along the way. You might discover that you need a bigger tank for the little turtle. You might have to turn out that, you know, there's foods that it needs, or doctor's visits it has to have, checkups. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know anything about a turtle other than the ones that I played with when I was a kid. And the one I had as a pet when I was about 7 or 8, I call it a pet, but it was free to come and go as it chose. It was a desert turtle, and it just walked into the yard one day. It had a hole in the back of its shell where somebody had probably kept it on a leash. And I just said to myself, there's no way I'm going to put a wild animal on a leash. And so I would feed it lettuce and other vegetables and stuff, and I just let it do what it wanted. It seemed to like the fact that I was feeding it, so it hung out. It would live underneath our house. It would go around and walk around. My dog would bark at it. But it pretty much did its own thing because it was coherent with who it was. It was in balance with what it wanted to do. It decided to come over and visit. It enjoyed the food, and at some point, I think that turtle just wandered off. I never saw it again, and that's perfectly fine. So, blocks in our lives, or roadblocks, or things that we become hemmed in by, mesmeric inertia, habits, you know, we all have them. I still have them. There's things that I'm having to challenge myself with and say, hey, Stephan, you know, what about this? You know, you've been kind of ignoring this for quite a while, so what about this? And so I have to ask myself, okay, well, what's it going to take to do something different than that? What steps do I need to take? And so that's just part of life. It's never over. We never, ever outgrow the process of learning. I don't care who you are. And if you think there's such thing as an enlightenment, there isn't. It's called growing up. And after you leave this body, you're going to come back and do this again and carry forth with you the core person of who you are. If you're a kind, loving, good person who's willing to forgive yourself, forgive others, do the right thing from now forward, regardless of what's happened or what you've done, then you're going to carry those core values with you into your next life. And maybe some of you think this is a bunch of hooey, and that's perfectly fine. I don't care. I've traveled out of my body, if you perceive it as that, on more than one occasion. When I was a kid, and after a car accident that put me in bed for almost 3 years. And I've researched it for the last 15, 20 years. There's millions of cases. So if you don't believe me and you're interested, go research it. It's not that big of a deal. It's all evident. And my point is that we have the opportunity to decide what kind of person we want to be. And hopefully we want to be a kind, gentle, loving person who doesn't need anything back from anyone else. We just be ourselves, do things that sound interesting, do things that sound fun, and give ourselves a chance to do that. Our lives here are just like a blink of an eye. I'm 61 years old, and geez, I feel like I've only been here a couple decades, but man, maybe that's all that I might have left here. I don't even know. So just take time to really quiet yourself if you can. You know, if you got a busy home life or lots of people you're around or lots of responsibilities, if you're young and you're just starting out trying to go up the corporate ladder or whatever it is, creating a new invention, that's all good and that's all fine. But maybe look at places in the closet of your mind where you have some habits that keep repeating themselves. You'll find that when it's a habit that's not productive or useful, that the universe has a way of reminding us. It might be a parent or a coworker that says, you know, why are you always late? Or, you know, why can't you finish things? You know, whatever it is. So look in your closet and see if there's something like that laying around. It's just a habit you have that you could possibly change. And that's a block. That block will keep translating itself through the experience of your life. And what happens with blocks is that they tend to get bigger. So if we don't exercise, as an example, and all we do is sit around, eventually we're going to have to be laying on our back in a hospital. So we go from sitting around to laying around in a hospital because our body didn't get enough exercise to make all the moving, you know, all the living parts move properly. So that's the way things can catch up with us. Or if we have a habit of always, you know, being sort of indifferent or curt to people. We're not very polite. We're just like kind of abrasive and not really caring about others. That'll probably catch up with us. The universe is interesting. The consciousness that we are knows who we are naturally. We're loving beings, and things can cloud our minds that make us something that we're not innately born to be. And that's what happens in human life. There's no way we can get around it, you know. So if well, we can't get around the fact that we'll experience some things to greater degree or lesser degree in human life. There's some things we can definitely get around by making better choices. But that doesn't mean we're always prepared or knowledgeable enough at the time or capable enough at the time emotionally to make better choices. So we definitely have to forgive ourselves and let go. But anyway, if you're retired and maybe you're bored, you want something to do, make a list of things you've always wanted to do since you were a kid. If you're young and you're just starting out, then do the same thing. Maybe you want to go climb Mount Everest, or, you know, have certain friends. I don't know. Do music. Create art. I just don't have any idea because I'm not you. And you would feel the same way if I asked you, hey, what should I do? You would be speechless because you wouldn't have any idea what was best for me. So I think a good goal is to just, in the present moment, each moment, have this tiny little goal of just becoming more coherent with ourselves, accepting that we have the opportunity to let go of certain things and investigate others out of inspiration. So I hope this is helpful. If it is, then that's great. If it's not, then that's okay. You've probably turned off the video before now anyway. So my best wishes to all of you, and have a great day.